All right, class. Well, welcome to our week, February 1st through the 6th in our graduate research and design. I got to get my mind off of that. It's not just educational. We have a lot of non-educational research going on in this class. Anyway, grad research and design class. This week, you have hopefully finished your city certification and submitted that and completed everything from last week. Wanted to talk to you just about where we're headed this semester overall. We have, in this semester, you are going to create that research proposal, and that includes a plan for doing your research as well as many different elements. So as you read in the chapters, you'll want to refer to those elements and want to pay attention so that you'll know what to do as you create this research proposal as time goes on. It's not due yet. The first element I think is due in a few weeks, but just pay attention to these chapters because in the end of this semester you'll have to create a proposal. No, you're not going to actually do a research study of your own, but instead you're going to have to submit a good, well thought out research proposal of the proposed research that you might do or that you could do if you were required to or needed to or wanted to. And so that's where you want to look, is that you're using the information that you're reading from the book and taking in the quizzes and so forth for completing your research proposal. So I'll be grading the city certification that you have submitted soon. It doesn't take too long to grade those. I just have to look through and make sure you did it, basically. But when I grade other assignments, such as the preliminary lit review, which is coming up next week, I'm going to use a rubric that has 100 possible points in it, but that doesn't mean that the item itself is worth 100 points. And so on the assignments, yeah, there are most likely going to be rubrics with 100 points on it, but when I grade out of 100, it becomes out of the appropriate amount in the grade book. So for instance, next week the preliminary literature review is worth 100 on the rubric, but it's only worth 20 in the grade book. So if I give you a 90 on that assignment, then it'll be 18 out of 20 in the grade book. So just don't panic about that being, worth a lot of points. Those aren't points that translate to the grade book. They're just rubric points, and then that translates into the grade book as another number for the grade book. Okay, well, let's take a look at this week's items. You're going to read Chapter 4 on preparing and evaluating a research plan. And so make sure that you do refer back to Chapter 4 as you work on your research proposal elements, because this is going to help you to do that correctly. And then Chapter 5 you'll read as well about selecting a sample, and this is how to select a group of people to participate in your study, whether that study is quantitative or qualitative. And then this week we're going to have a discussion about reviewing the literature and what are some databases that you have found helpful in finding good quality research reports. It seems that there is some overlap between many students on what they're interested in, and so this may be helpful to share some of the good quality databases that are available for you as you've searched out information. And you may also want to share professional organizations that contribute to research in your area of interest. And so go ahead and participate in that discussion. Remember, as with other discussions, you should post a main post yourself and then also respond to 2 other students' threads in the discussion board. You're also going to go through some learning modules about evaluating and using information, and so those are going to help you with some basic research ideas and skills. And then you'll take quizzes from chapters 4 and 5 for this week. So those are the items from this week, and remember you'll be referring back to chapter 4, which is sort of a seminal chapter for creating your research proposal later in the semester. I also just wanted to take a look at next week, February 8th through the 13th, so we have an idea of what's going on. Right here we have a preliminary literature review due, and so I think I did mention this before, but this is a good review of it. Use the annotated reference list that you have been creating. So remember, you're supposed to be reading those 2 or 3 articles every week of research reports to make a preliminary literature review, and this review would include the following items: APA formatted narrative writing, studies categorized logically according to results, types of studies, focus of studies, or another logical factor. Writing flows logically, systematically, and there are 7 to 10 sources in this preliminary literature review. So that will be due by the end of next week, and I'll give you some feedback on your work, which you'll incorporate into your final literature review that will be due later in the semester. But in order for you to do good research, it should be informed by literature. And so that's why I'm asking you to read, to explore, to find information, and then to put it together in a preliminary literature review. And so that is what will be due next week. So prepare that now. One thing that you can do to really prepare for that is to take your information that you have hopefully been gathering in an annotated bibliography. Let me pull up one example here. So this could be an APA annotation. You have the APA formatted reference right here, and then you have information about it right here after in a couple of paragraphs. So it says, in this book of nonfiction based on the journalist's experiential research, Ehrenreich attempts to ascertain whether it's currently possible for an individual to live on a minimum wage in America. So you're mentioning this is your annotated bibliography that hopefully you have been working on, you've been creating, so that each item that you read has some information with it like this that tells about what's inside, what are some of the major findings of the bibliography or of the reference. And so next week, when it comes time to actually write this up, you are going to take these annotations, put this in the reference list, and then inside the literature review itself, you're going to systematically organize the articles that you have read so far. And you're going to organize them in a logical way, probably by subject studied. Like, what did they study in this research study that you read about? And then organize them logically by those kinds of studies. Or by something else that might be more logical based on what you're going to create. And then it's a narrative, so that means you are going to talk about who studied what, when, what was their outcomes, how does this study relate to the next study. You don't just list, here's what not to do, don't just list a bunch of sources by saying Smith found, when Smith did a study on third graders versus fourth graders on reading comprehension and found this. Johnson did a study on fifth graders versus second graders on something else and did this. No, you're not just going to list a bunch of studies out and then talk about each one separately. No, you have to interweave them. You have to make them fit with each other. Instead you'd say something like this. Smith found this in his study, which would go against this Johnson studies, which found this. Here's the difference, and I think that this might be the reason why the difference in the findings of those studies. So you're weaving them together, you're talking about them, you're organizing them according to a logical, systematic type of way of thinking about things. So that's the preliminary literature review. That'll be due next week, and that's just some advice on getting started on putting that preliminary literature review together based on what you've been reading, the articles and research studies that you've been reading so far. If you haven't been reading those articles, boy, you need to catch up real quick. So make sure you are reading lots of articles this week and next week to be able to be ready for that preliminary literature review, because you do need those 7, what does it say here? 7 to 10 sources. So you need, and most of those need to be results of research studies, as I said in last week's video to you guys. All right, so putting things together for that literature review and preparing that is the next step. And again, like I said, a literature review is vital to doing research. It's vital to doing good research that makes sense and research within an area that is useful. Too many research studies are done in areas that are just not very useful, unfortunately, and it's probably because a lot of times the authors don't really look at what's already done and what's already been done out there in the research. So this literature review is an opportunity for you to look and see what studies have already been done in an area that you're interested in, and what are the findings of those studies, and then to find your own gap, to find your own area, saying, okay, well, it looks like these things are already known. We've already done studies in these areas, but oh, there's a missing study, or there's no study done in this little area that I'm interested in. So maybe I could make a proposal about that, doing a study like that. But it's also legitimate to do a study that's very similar to what somebody else has already done for a study. And there are good reasons for that too, that we don't do enough replication of other people's studies to try to find out if we get the same results or similar ones. And instead we tend to try to just find those gaps all the time, which you can do studies in areas that have already been done as well, and you could propose that in this class as long as you have a pretty good reason for doing so. So that's an intro to this week. Again, if you have questions about things, let me know, and have a great week.